Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. 14 years ago, the Australian government in the Sydney Morning Herald announced the Australian permanent drought. And then in 2010 and 2011, it rained so much in Australia that it actually caused global sea level to drop. Huge amounts of water moved from the oceans onto the Australian land surface. The floods of 2010 and 2011 were again followed by a drought in 2019 and 2020. But the following year was very wet in Australia, and 2021 ended with no part of the country in drought. And during the past winter, Australia saw some very large floods. The world's #1 climate fraudster Michael Mann claims that these swings between wet and dry in Australia are caused by the burning of fossil fuels. But large swings between drought and flood has always been the climate of Australia, as reported by the Sydney Morning Herald in 1876. 1789 drought, 1797 drought, 1799 flood, 1811 flood, slight drought. Flood, severe drought, flood, slight drought, flood, slight drought, flood. In 1827 there was flood and severe drought the same year. Large swings between drought and flood are the normal climate of Australia and always have been. But snake oil salesman Michael Mann wants Australians to believe that if they give up their reliable supply of energy, the weather will be much more stable. There's no scientific or historical basis to his claims, but he makes lots of money spreading this misinformation. Here's an article from Australia from 1846 on the change of climate. That great changes have taken place in the climate of Australia, all testimonies satisfactorily prove. The Aborigines say that the climate has undergone this change since white man came in country. So 175 years ago, people were blaming the variable climate of Australia on white men. And they're still doing that now. They say that all bad weather is caused by white men. The Washington Post took this one step further and blamed a hurricane on a specific white man, President Trump. Blaming the weather on specific people is an age-old tradition. In the 16th century, perceived changes in weather patterns were blamed on witches. 30,000 people in Europe were accused of cooking the weather and were burned at the stake. Superstitious and ignorant people have always believed that they could attribute changes in the weather which they don't understand to something specific. This story appeared last week. Climate scientists announced that they had a model which could assign specific climate blame. Their model can take specific weather events from the past and blame it on carbon dioxide, which is of course produced by white men. But if their models were any good, they would be able to predict the future rather than blame the past. If academics actually understood what drives changes in the weather patterns, predicting the future should be easy for them. But these models have no skill at predicting the future. A good example of this is that last week the press was saying New Mexico is having the worst mega drought in 1,200 years. And this week the press says that New Mexico is having 100-year floods. None of the modelers predicted this change from drought to flood. Climate academics do not understand what drives the climate, and they have no clue what they're doing. But because all serious scientists are being censored, the nonsensical claims of climate academics never come under any scrutiny. At some point, Michael Mann's disinformation campaign will catch up with him. His fraud can only exist in an intellectual and historical vacuum. But with climate fraud driving the world into energy poverty, this climate scam is going to start coming under a lot of scrutiny. Justice eventually caught up with Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff's fraud bilked the world out of about $65 billion, but climate fraud is going to cost the world many trillions and hurt billions of people. Toto has been exposing these scamsters for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Upala, and Toki on the web at RealClimateScience.com.